Fresh off my latest YouTube strike, welcome to KLIM.news, Christy Lee Independent Media, where you'll find exclusive content. And by exclusive, I mean purposefully excluding censorship-loving YouTube. My guest today is no stranger to censorship. While the mainstream news would rather have you know him as an anti-vaxxer or a member of the Dirty Dozen of misinformation, we're going to give credit where credit is due. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the founder of Waterkeeper Alliance, as well as founder, chairman of the board, and chief legal counsel for Children's Health Defense, and of counsel to Morgan & Morgan, a nationwide personal injury practice. Mr. Kennedy is an esteemed author, of course, with a long list of published books, including the New York Times bestseller, Crimes Against Nature. His reputation as a resolute defender of the environment and children's health stems from a litany of successful legal actions. He received recognition for his role in the landmark victory against Monsanto, as well as in the DuPont case that inspired the movie Dark Waters. So welcome to the show, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Thank you, Christy.
I feel like I'm out of breath with your biography. Maybe that's why the mainstream news just finds it simpler to call you anti-vax and call it a day.
Well, I'm not anti-vaccine. I've said that for 17 years. I just want safe vaccines, and I want robust science, independent regulators. But calling me anti-vax is a way and applying that pejorative to me and other people who are vaccine hesitant or vaccine skeptical is a way of marginalizing us, of vilifying us, of gaslighting people so that nobody has to listen because you sound crazy.
Right. And they've actually gone to the extent of redefining anti-vax as to be someone against mandates. So it's ridiculous that they're now taking the literal definition of words and changing them. But you're already a New York Times bestselling author, but now you can add the real Anthony Fauci to the list of bestsellers. It's sold out on Amazon. It's Wall Street Journal, USA Today, national bestseller. So I'm going to be that annoying interview and ask you two questions at once. One, did you expect this crazy reception to this book for it to be as successful as it is? And many of us, I know I'm wondering, the other question to this is, did you have doubts that it could be published? It's almost surprising that it hasn't been censored.
Well, I didn't have any doubts that it could be published because Skyhorse publisher, we have our own, CHD has our own imprint at Skyhorse, and Skyhorse has been, for I guess 30 years, leading the crusade against censorship of all kinds. So it's a publisher that can't be intimidated. And actually, Tony Lyons, who owns the publishing house, did an amazing interview on Tucker Carlson the other day in which he really, laid out the philosophy of Skyhorse, which is just a complete opposition to censorship of any kind. So they publish a lot of dissenting views, so I wasn't surprised about that. What has surprised me is that the book has done so well in the face of a wall of censorship. The book is #1 seller in the world. Last week in the first week, we sold 120,000 copies, and in 9 days, we sold 160,000. We completely sold out the first printing, and that's without a review in any newspaper. It's with us not being allowed to do promotions. It's with many of the independent bookstores and places like Barnes & Noble actively censoring us, ordering small numbers of books, not putting us in the front window. The best-selling book of the week listed on the New York Times was Will Smith's book, but my book sold 120,000 copies, and Will sold only 86,000 copies, and kudos to him for that. But that's another indicia of censorship, that they won't even list us. That they're just doing the math wrong. They're just to make sure that we don't get #1 on the best-selling list. But despite all of that, just through word of mouth and through independent media like this one, the book is surpassing all expectations.
That's amazing. And The Real Anthony Fauci is no small book, but that's due in part to just the sheer number of citations. I've heard that there's thousands of citations and sources. So can you verify that? And how were you able to pull together so many sources on this?
The book has about 2,200 citations, and I really want it to be a reference book for people. And I also, when you write a book that's this long, the book is about 200,000 words. So it's a 480-page book, but it's kind of crammed into 480 pages. And it could have been a 900-page book if we actually laid it out in typical format. But it's really an encyclopedia of what's happened to this country, specifically over the past 20 years, these impositions of these bizarre totalitarian controls. But it's also kind of a 50-year history of how we arrived at this place, of the gradual co-option of all the public health agencies by pharmaceutical companies. And I've been fighting the battle for 17 years, so I have an intimate familiarity with it at a granular level, and I try to provide people in a way that's accessible, that's fun to read, but also is an important and lasting reference for people who want to look up facts about what's happening and verify them and be able to make the arguments.
I know I've read from people that have reviewed the book that it almost reads like a crime thriller, but the sad part of it is that it's all reality. So as far as your motivations for this book, you really did what I thought has been lost in journalism. I'm a long-term journalist, been in the field for 20 years in traditional media, so I've seen the evolution of how it's changed. And one thing I've seen change is really the tenet of journalism to examine conflicts and motivations of interest. And I see that in this book, you're really examining the conflicts of interests and the motivations behind Bill Gates and Fauci. But it seems like you point to the financial conflicts of interest and the financial motivations. So can you explain what other motivations there might be? Because it seems like these folks already have plenty of money. So what are other motivations there?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I really try to avoid in writing this book is looking into the heads of Tony Fauci and Bill Gates. Well, I don't really know what motivates them. What I do is I document patterns of behavior. And I think when you read those patterns of behavior, that the motivation becomes clear. And as you say, I think it's a mistake to look at people like Bill Gates or Tony Fauci and say that money itself is a motivation. People are motivated by the same thing. Good people and bad people are motivated, and throughout history, by the same thing, which is not money in itself, not the currency, but rather the accumulation of power. We all want power in our lives. We want power over our environments. We want power over our food supply, our shelter. We want to be able to protect our family, but ultimately, people want to be able to control other people and their behavior for better or for worse. And if you look at kind of the worst tyrants in history, that's what motivated them, is a broad control over humanity. And that is the central ambition of the totalitarian state. Control over every aspect of human behavior, right down to human thought, controlling what we hear, what we listen to, the way that we interpret the world and the way that we process the world, and to control particularly expression, facial expressions. And one of the ways you do that is through masking, but also, all forms of expression, because expression is our way of conveying dissent and rebellion and resistance. And so if you look at, any example of totalitarianism, for example, Hitler, when he went into Romania and Czechoslovakia and Poland, the Gestapo had standing orders to murder all of the intellectuals, the college professors, the people, the poets, the artists, people who were capable of and inclined towards self-expression, because that's the way of controlling human behavior. And if you look at the most totalitarian countries in the world today, which are probably the theocratic states of the Mideast, those states require masking for certain classes of citizens.